Let's take a look at a brand new sparring footage of Sean Strickland and Mike Perry, which recently came out. And first and foremost, we need to mention, Sean Strickland is looking thick with 4 C's. He actually got on the scales the other day and he was weighing 230 pounds. And I know that Mike Perry fights at 170, but he's probably pushing 200. So even though there is a size discrepancy, it's probably not as much as people think, but best believe that those shots are going to feel heavy. And I know Sean Strickland's not necessarily someone which sits down on his shots, or unless it's some sort of YouTube influencer. But if you've got someone that's just boom, popping a jab or boom, popping the teep, they may not look that devastating, but they're certainly going to be quite heavy. And I'm just completely guessing here, but I reckon this is Mike Perry's first sparring session back, maybe, or maybe first couple of sessions back. Obviously, we haven't seen him since Jake Paul fight, which was just over a year ago, I believe. And also, it's worth mentioning that Mike Perry had one of the greatest post-UFC careers of all time. And I won't be debated on that. The man went away from the biggest fight promotion on earth, completely revamped his image to the bare knuckle king, and then went on an insane 6-fight winning streak. Insane. Names like Michael Venom Page on there, Eddie Alvarez on there, Luke Rockhold. That is a very, very bizarre set of names, first and foremost, but very skilled and legitimate champions as well. All champions, in fact, from all different weight classes. So that just goes to show what a dog Mike Perry is. But one thing that we can't get away from is the fact that his boxing is not necessarily the sharpest. One thing that he does do fairly well, is something that I always hear Brad Pickett say, is when you're fighting a taller fighter and they're punching down to you, you have to come with shots over their shots. And that's something that Mike Perry actually does a good job of, as you can see there as he lands the left hook. Don't get me wrong, he does stand square up in the pocket and leave his chin a little bit floating in the air to get tagged. And Sean Strickland does pop him a few times. But it does go to show, in MMA and bare knuckle, you don't always have to be the cleanest, but you can just be effective. And Mike Perry is certainly effective, if nothing else. But like I said, I would guess that this is one of his first spars back, because he looks pretty gassed at this point. Obviously, this is a training footage that we have no context to, so maybe they did 10 rounds before, quite possibly. And that sometimes is the case with these type of things. But I would guess that he hasn't done a bunch of training after that Jake Paul fight. Probably got paid a very, very nice amount of money, and also obviously took quite a bit of damage in the fight and is probably just getting back into things. But not an easy round to get back into things with a heavyweight Sean Strickland, because like I said, a lot of these small shots that are not landing crazy are definitely going to have a bit of sting in them. And going back to the point that I made with Brad Pickett and how he said you have to counter taller fighters when they're punching down, on the flip side of that, he also said if you are the taller fighter, a way that you can caveat that so that people aren't punching over your shots is to sink back on your back leg, and you can actually still keep the range, but then you mitigate the shorter fighter's ability to come over the top of your shots, and you can still fight out range but sting them from outside of where they're able to hit you. And you can see Mike Perry saying, come on, calling him on. And you can't actually necessarily hear it in the clip, but Sean Strickland says, what is your head made out of? Absolute concrete. Now, this isn't necessarily the smartest sparring, but it's definitely some good work from Mike Perry, pushing a very heavy pace. And Sean Strickland's usually the person to be backing people up, but you can see here, Mike Perry's just walking forward, walking through the traffic and trying to land these shots. And it's getting towards the end of the round, and you can see him really start feeling it now. He looks very out of breath as he's mouth breathing and just sort of backing up against the cage. And that's usually where Mike Perry does his best work in bare knuckle boxing and in the MMA fights, is he's usually able to wear people down. He doesn't always necessarily land a ton early on, but he's able to at least back them up consistently, and it's very tiring fighting on the back foot. And that's actually something that Sean Strickland does very well as well, and usually how he wears down his opponent. So it's kind of similar for both fighters, but obviously at very different weight classes. So let me know what you think about the footage. Little hit of your Dom for good measure. And as always, keep it casual.